Two men, both 45 years old. Michael wakes up every morning at 6 a.m., goes to a job that drains him, comes home where he performs being fine, and every night before sleep feels an emptiness he can't explain. David is also 45, but he wakes differently, with clarity, with purpose, with a peace he didn't have at 30. People around him sense this, and they ask, "What changed in you?" The difference between them happened 5 years ago, the day they both turned 40. Michael ignored what he was feeling, called it a phase, called it burnout, called it normal, continued the same life. David paused and asked himself a brutal question. How many years have I truly lived? Not the age of his body, the age of his consciousness. And the answer hit like a punch. Almost none. I've been performing, not living. That's when he encountered a passage in Thoth's emerald tablets, a line encoded thousands of years ago. At 40, the initiate dies a second time and can be reborn into awareness. Thoth described human life not as a straight line, but as two distinct cycles, two births, the first at birth when you enter physical form, the second around 40 when you can awaken to conscious living. But there's a challenge. This second birth isn't automatic. It's a doorway that opens, and you have a window to walk through it. If you walk through, you enter the second life, the real life, the conscious life, the life with purpose. If you ignore it, the door gradually closes, and you spend the next decades like Michael, alive but not living, breathing but not feeling, existing but not being. David walked through that door. He followed a path that Thoth encoded in the Hermetic texts, and what happened after changed everything. His mental clarity sharpened, his sense of purpose crystallized, his relationships deepened. He didn't become happier in a superficial way. He became more real. Modern neuroscience has discovered something that validates Thoth's observations. Around age 40, the brain undergoes a significant reorganization. Research from University College London tracking adults through their 5th decade found increased neuroplasticity during this period. It's a second window of neural malleability in adult life. If you navigate this moment consciously, you can rewire deep patterns. If you ignore it, those patterns solidify into the structure that carries you through the rest of your life. Now let me ask you something direct. Are you closer to Michael or David? Are you living or merely surviving? Because if you're feeling that emptiness, that restlessness, that sense that there must be something more, it may not be crisis, it may be the threshold opening. And before I show you the complete map that Thoth left, you need to understand exactly what's happening inside you right now, why you feel what you feel, and what this moment actually represents. Let me show you something happening in your biology at this exact moment. If you're between 38 and 50, something profound is shifting. It's not just hormonal, it's not just physical, it's structural. Between ages 38 and 45, neural pathways that have been stable for decades become more flexible. Old connections can be reformed, new patterns can emerge, and during this process you feel it, you feel that restlessness, that constant questioning, that sense that something is off, but you can't name what. This isn't necessarily pathology. It can be your system signaling that reconfiguration is possible, but Thoth recognized this pattern thousands of years ago. In the Emerald Tablets, he described this phase as the passage through the 5th chamber of a menti. A menti, in Hermetic teaching, represents the 7 chambers of consciousness. Each chamber marks a stage of evolution, and each connects to a specific life cycle. The first chamber, 0 to 7 years, anchoring in physical form. The second chamber, 7 to 14 years, awakening of rational mind. The third chamber, 14 to 21 years, formation of the earthly self. The fourth chamber, 21 to 40 years, construction of the social identity. The fifth chamber, 40 to 49 years, the second death and rebirth. The sixth chamber, 49 to 63 years, integration of higher consciousness. The seventh chamber, 63 and beyond, preparation for transcendence. Most people live only through the fourth chamber. They build the external identity, the social mask, the performance, and then they stop. They spend the rest of their lives maintaining that mask, performing, pretending, surviving, but never truly living. The fifth chamber, is the turning point. It's the moment when you can die to the constructed self and be reborn into authentic consciousness. The Ka, in Egyptian teaching, is the etheric double. You have two aspects of Ka. The lower Ka, your constructed identity, your ego, your social masks. The higher Ka, your authentic consciousness, your true self, your essence. From 0 to 40, you live almost exclusively in the lower Ka. You build an identity based on external approval, social status, material achievements, and social roles. Parent, professional, partner, provider. And all of this is necessary. You need to build the lower Ka first. It's the foundation, but it's not the final destination. Around 40, something shifts. The higher Ka begins to pulse. It begins sending signals. And these signals are disruptive. You start questioning everything. Why am I doing this? Does this actually matter? Who am I without these masks? Am I living or just existing? These questions don't come from your rational mind. They come from the higher Ka attempting to awaken. And most people suppress these signals. Call it crisis. Try to return to normal, increase work, buy things, seek distractions, anything to silence the call. But the call doesn't stop. It grows louder. Because biologically, neurologically, energetically, you're being pushed toward transformation. And if you resist, the discomfort intensifies. You become like Michael, waking each day with that weight, that void, that sense of being betrayed by a life that isn't yours. But if you respond to the call, if you walk through the doorway, something extraordinary happens. You enter the second life, the life of the higher Ka, and this life is radically different from the first. In the first life, you lived for others' approval. In the second life, you live from your essence. In the first life, you sought validation. In the second life, you seek authenticity. In the first life, you accumulated. In the second life, you integrate. And this integration isn't vague metaphor. It's a process that unfolds across mental, emotional, and energetic dimensions. Thoth called this the great work, transforming the lead of ego into the gold of consciousness. And he encoded in the emerald tablets a specific understanding of how this unfolds. But there's something crucial you need to know before beginning, something Thoth warned about that most people overlook. And missing this can derail you in the middle of the process. The challenge is attempting the transformation without understanding what you'll face. Because when you walk through the threshold, you don't enter a field of flowers. You enter the territory of the dweller on the threshold. The dweller on the threshold is a central concept in Thoth's teachings. It's not an external entity. It's the sum of everything you've repressed, denied, hidden, and rejected in yourself over the first 40 years. All the truths you didn't want to face, all the desires you suffocated, all the parts of yourself that didn't fit the mask, all of this has been accumulating. And now, when you try to cross into the higher Ka, the dweller appears. It blocks the passage and forces you to face everything you avoided. This isn't easy, it's confronting. Many people turn back here because the dweller isn't gentle. It shows your self-deceptions, your betrayals of yourself, your deepest fears, your hidden shames. And if you're not prepared, you can lose your footing. You might run back to the first life because at least there you knew who to pretend to be. But if you face the dweller, if you look at it without fleeing, something shifts. It begins to dissolve. And what was blocking the passage becomes fuel for transformation. David faced the dweller in his third month of exploration, and he almost gave up. Let me tell you exactly what happened to him, because this will help you understand what this passage actually involves. David was 40 when he found the emerald tablets. He was a corporate attorney, earned well, had recognition, appeared successful, but inside he felt hollow. He'd drink alone most nights to quiet his mind enough to sleep. His marriage felt more like a business arrangement. His entire life was a performance, and he knew it, but he didn't know what to do about it. Until a friend gave him an old book with translations of the tablets. David was skeptical, but something in that text hooked him, especially one line, "The man who reaches 40 without awakening is already dead, though his body continues breathing." He felt like Thoth was speaking directly to him, and he decided to explore the path described in the tablets, a process that unfolded over months, divided into 3 alchemical phases. Phase 1. Nigredo, the death of the earthly self. David began by removing the distractions he used to avoid himself, the alcohol he used to numb himself, the constant digital stimulation, the TV he'd watch mindlessly every evening. He created silence, and in silence, everything he'd been avoiding surfaced. The practice here is simple but not easy. Sit with yourself. No distractions, no techniques, no guided anything. Just you and whatever arises. In the beginning, it's chaos, racing thoughts, anxiety, restlessness. This is normal. This is the purification beginning. David also did something crucial. He inventoried his masks. He wrote down every version of himself he performed for others. David at work, David with his parents, David with his wife, David with friends, David on social media. And for each version he asked, is this really me? Or is this what I learned I should be? Brutal honesty here is essential. Nobody else will read this. It's for you. This phase typically lasts several weeks, and it's uncomfortable. You'll see how much of yourself you've abandoned to fit in. You'll feel anger, sadness, maybe emptiness. Don't run from these feelings. They're the dissolution that makes space for what's real. The first week David had severe insomnia, couldn't turn off his mind. Obsessive thoughts about his failures, regrets, wrong choices. The second week, anger came. Anger at himself for wasting so much time. Anger at his parents for never teaching him this. Anger at society for selling lies about what success meant. The third week, sadness. A deep, visceral sadness for all the versions of himself he'd killed to fit in. And in the fourth week, emptiness. An emptiness so vast, he didn't know who he was anymore. This is the Nigredo, the necessary decomposition, the complete dissolution of the earthly self. Thoth wrote, before rebuilding, you must dismantle. Before rebirth, you must die. David was dying, and he almost quit. But something made him continue. Phase 2, Albedo, the encounter with the dweller. In the fifth week, David began a practice of deep contemplation. Every day before dawn, he'd sit in silence for an hour. No guided meditation, no music, no technique, just observing what arose. And this is where the dweller appeared, not as a dramatic vision, but as a presence, a sense that there was someone observing him from within. And this presence began showing things, memories he'd buried, moments when he betrayed himself to please others, decisions made from fear, not desire, relationships maintained for convenience, not love. And with each revelation, David felt crushing shame, as if he were being judged by a part of himself he didn't know existed. In the seventh week, he had a breakdown, cried for hours alone on the bathroom floor, feeling like he didn't deserve to continue, that it was too late, that he'd ruined everything. This is the most dangerous phase of the journey, where most people give up, because the dweller shows truths that feel almost impossible to bear. But Thoth taught something crucial here. The dweller isn't there to destroy you. It's there to liberate you. Because every time you look at a hidden truth, it loses power over you. Every time you admit a lie you lived, you free yourself from it. And that's what David began doing. Instead of fleeing the dweller's revelations, he started accepting them. Yes, I betrayed myself. Yes, I lived for external approval. Yes, I'm afraid of not being loved. Each admission was like releasing a weight. And in the eighth week, something changed. The dweller stopped attacking. It became silent, as if it had completed its function, and David understood. The dweller was never an enemy, it was a guardian, ensuring that only those ready for truth could pass through. David had passed the test, and now he was ready for the final phase. David also did something transformative, radical forgiveness. He made a list of everyone he felt had hurt him, and beside each name wrote, I release you from my judgment. This doesn't mean what they did was okay. It means you're no longer carrying the weight of it. Then he made another list. Every time he'd hurt someone else, even unintentionally, even if it was justified, and beside each wrote, I forgive myself for not knowing better then. Forgiveness isn't weakness, it's alchemy. Transmuting emotional lead into the gold of freedom. This phase can last several weeks to a few months. It's where most people quit because it's the most confronting. But if you persist, something shifts. Phase 3. Rubedo, the birth of the higher car. The third phase was completely different from the first two. No more pain, no more chaos, just clarity. David began feeling like he was seeing the world for the first time. Colors seemed more vivid, sounds sharper. People around him seemed transparent. He could sense intentions behind words. He knew when someone was lying, not through analysis, but through direct perception. And the strangest part, he began knowing things before they happened. Small things at first. He'd know who was calling before looking at his phone. He'd know when a meeting would be cancelled. He'd know when someone was about to quit. It wasn't prediction. It was like he was tuned to a different frequency. A frequency where time wasn't linear. The practice here is realignment. You've cleared out the false, now you build the true. David took a blank page and wrote his 5 core values. Not what he thought he should value. Not what his parents valued. What he, in the depth of his being, actually valued. Authenticity, freedom, creation, connection, growth. Then he looked at his current life. How many hours per week did he devote to each value? The gap was stark, so he began realigning. Slowly, intentionally. In the 10th week, David made a decision that would change everything, but he didn't make it impulsively. He'd spent 3 months exploring what truly mattered to him. He'd consulted with people he trusted. He'd created a financial plan. He'd discussed it deeply with his wife. And then he made his move. He left the corporate firm to start his own practice, taking only clients whose cases aligned with his values. His colleagues thought he was crazy. But David was calmer than he'd ever been. Because for the first time in his life, he wasn't making decisions from fear. He was making decisions from alignment. And he knew, with unexplainable certainty, he was doing the right thing. In the 11th week, opportunities began appearing. Not jobs, opportunities. People he hadn't seen in years reached out unexpectedly. Project proposals he never would have imagined, as if reality was responding to his new frequency. And in the 12th week, David realized, he wasn't the same person anymore, not in the superficial sense of changed careers or changed lifestyle, but in the profound sense of, I died and was reborn. The lower car had been dissolved. The higher car had taken the lead. And now David lived from a completely different place. He no longer sought approval. He no longer feared judgment. He no longer performed for others. He simply was. And this authenticity changed everything around him. People who'd previously admired him began pulling away, because they could no longer manipulate him. But people who resonated with his truth began appearing. Deep, genuine, real relationships. His marriage, which had been near collapse, was tested. His wife didn't recognize him anymore, and she had to choose, fall in love with the real version of him or separate. It took months, but she chose to stay, and together they rebuilt their relationship from scratch. Not based on roles or expectations, but based on 2 authentic beings recognizing each other. David also did something symbolic but powerful, a rebirth ceremony. On a morning after completing his journey, he went to a park at dawn, wore clothes that felt aligned with who he'd become, and spoke aloud, I, David, die to the constructed self. I'm reborn into authentic consciousness. The second life begins now. It wasn't theatrical. It was a marker, a declaration, and it anchored the transformation. Today, 5 years later, David lives a life that looks nothing like his previous one. He works as an independent consultant, choosing only projects that resonate with his values. He earns less money, but has more time. He has less social status, but more inner peace. And people around him feel this. They ask, what happened to you? And he answers, I walked through the threshold. But David's story isn't unique. Let me tell you about Sarah, 44, from Boston. Because her transformation was even more radical. And it'll show you that no matter how deeply buried you are in the first life, the threshold is still accessible. Sarah had everything society says a woman should have at 44, married for 20 years to a successful entrepreneur, 2 kids in college, large house in an upscale neighborhood, annual trips to Europe, friend group, active social life. From the outside, perfection. From the inside, prison. Sarah had suffocated her true nature for so long she didn't know who she was anymore. She'd been the perfect daughter, the perfect wife, the perfect mother, and in the process, had erased Sarah. At 44, she had her first panic attack. Out of nowhere, at dinner with friends, her chest tightened, air vanished, and she was certain she was dying. Went to the hospital. They ran every test. Nothing. The experience shook her. She started examining her life more closely and began seeing the patterns. How she'd spent decades performing femininity, being the acceptable version of woman, sweet, gentle, compliant, available. And in the silence of honest self-reflection, another Sarah began emerging. A Sarah who was fierce, who had anger about being silenced for so long, who had desires she'd never dared express, who had strong opinions she'd always swallowed. Sarah's journey through the Nigredo was what she described as dying while still alive. She realized she'd spent 44 years building a mask so perfect she didn't know where the mask ended and where she began. And the pain of this realization was physical. She spent nights awake, shaking, crying, feeling like she was disintegrating, but she didn't stop. In the Albedo phase, Sarah faced her dweller, and her dweller had a specific name: shame. Shame about her real desires, shame about her sexuality, shame about her ambition, shame about her anger. Everything a family woman wasn't supposed to feel. And for weeks, Sarah had to look at each of these shames and ask, is this actually mine, or was it placed on me? The answer was always the same: placed. And in the Rubedo phase, Sarah was reborn. But not as the woman she was before, as something completely new. She didn't make rash decisions. She spent 6 months in therapy working through these revelations. She had honest, difficult conversations with her husband about who she actually was beneath the performance. She slowly began expressing her real opinions, setting clear boundaries, pursuing interests she'd abandoned at 20. Her husband had a choice: accept the real version of her or lose her. It took a year of couples therapy. It was brutal, honest, deconstructive. But they stayed together, because her husband also began his own awakening process upon seeing her transformation. Today Sarah is 49, and she says the last 5 years have been the only real years of her life. She started her own business, something she always wanted but never dared. She reconnected with parts of herself she'd buried at 20, and she now helps other women navigate the threshold. Because she understands this transformation isn't optional, it's inevitable. The only question is, do you cross consciously or unconsciously? Consciously, you're reborn. Unconsciously, you calcify. But let me show you now what's behind these transformations, because it's not just psychological, it's not just spiritual, it's biological and energetic. And when you understand the mechanics, you realize Thoth wasn't being metaphorical. He was describing real processes. Research in adult development shows that midlife represents a critical juncture. Studies tracking adults longitudinally find that those who engage in significant self-reflection and intentional growth during their 40s report higher life satisfaction in their 50s and 60s. Those who suppress or avoid this exploratory phase often experience increased regret and decreased well-being later. The difference isn't random. It's about whether you use this window consciously. At the same time, understanding of neuroplasticity has evolved. While the brain's capacity for change does decrease with age, it doesn't disappear. Adults in their 40s retain significant ability to form new neural pathways, especially when engaging in novel experiences and deep reflection. This means that between 38 and 50, you have a biological window to reshape patterns. After this window, change becomes more challenging, though never impossible. Thoth recognized this. He called it the window of a mentee, a period where the threshold stands open. If you pass through it, you transform. If you don't, you solidify. And solidification isn't physical death, it's the end of psychological evolution. You continue living, but you stop growing. You become a fixed version of who you were at 40. And that version carries you through the next 40 years, but there's another aspect even more profound, the shift in presence. This isn't abstract spirituality, it's observable. Researchers studying heart rate variability have found that individuals who undergo significant personal transformation often show increased coherence in their cardiac rhythms. Higher coherence is associated with greater emotional regulation, improved decision-making, and enhanced intuition. They measured people before and after processes of deep personal work, and the coherence patterns shifted measurably. This isn't coincidence. Thoth taught that the heart is the portal between the lower ka and the higher ka, and when you activate the higher ka, your physiological patterns change. You literally operate from a different state, and when your state changes, what you attract changes. People, opportunities, synchronicities. This is what happened with David and Sarah. It wasn't luck that new opportunities appeared. It was resonance. They changed frequency, and reality responded. Thoth called this the law of correspondence. As within, so without. As above, so below. When you change internally, the external reorganizes to match, but you can't force the external to change first. You have to shift the internal frequency, and that's what Thoth's map facilitates. It shifts your frequency from the lower ka to the higher ka, and when that happens, everything changes. Now let me share the map, the understanding that can guide your passage if you choose to walk through. But before I do, understand something clearly. This isn't a quick fix, this isn't a hack, this isn't comfortable. It's a genuine death and rebirth process, and it requires courage to face what you've been avoiding. If you're not ready to see truths about yourself that might be uncomfortable, this path isn't for you yet. If you're expecting it to be easy, you'll be disappointed. But if you're feeling that call, that restlessness, that sense that there must be more, this might be exactly what you need. That's the map Thoth encoded. Not a quick fix, not a 12-week guarantee, a genuine journey of death and rebirth. And I need to tell you something that Thoth warned about, something that happens after you walk through. When you cross the threshold and enter the second life, you'll lose some people. Friends based on the old version of you will drift away. Family members who preferred controlling you will resist. Colleagues who benefited from your compliance will be irritated. And you'll feel alone for a time. This is normal. This is part of the process, because you're changing frequency, and not everyone can match it. But here's what Thoth promised, and what both David and Sarah confirm. After you lose the people who don't resonate, you find the ones who do. And these relationships are different, they're deep, genuine, unmasked. They're based on authentic recognition. And these relationships are worth more than 100 surface friendships. Beyond that, you stop feeling lonely, because you're no longer disconnected from yourself. The worst loneliness isn't being alone. It's being surrounded by people and still feeling empty. When you live from the higher ka, you can be physically alone, but never feel lonely, because you're home in yourself. And there's another aspect that changes radically: your purpose. In the first life, you probably pursued success, status, accumulation. In the second life, you seek meaning, contribution, legacy. Not in the grandiose sense of changing the world, but in the profound sense of, I lived my truth, and that inspired others to live theirs. David didn't become a famous spiritual leader, but he profoundly touches people around him simply by being authentic. Sarah didn't write a bestseller, but she's changed the lives of dozens of women who walk through the threshold with her guidance. This is real legacy, not fame, not external recognition, but vibrational impact. You elevate the frequency of everyone around you just by existing in your truth. Now let me talk about the signs that you're ready to walk through, because not everyone at 40 is ready. Some need a few more years. Others might be ready at 38. Chronological age is just a reference. What matters are the internal signals. Signal 1. Constant restlessness. You can no longer ignore the sense that something's missing. Even when everything externally is fine, you feel a void. Signal 2. Deep questioning. You start questioning everything you previously accepted as truth. Your career, your relationships, your values, your beliefs. Signal 3. Loss of interest. Things that used to motivate you no longer have the same power. Status doesn't excite you anymore. Approval doesn't fulfill you. Signal 4. Recurring dreams or insights. You start having vivid dreams or sudden insights about your life, as if a deeper part of you is trying to communicate. Signal 5. Unexplained changes. Shifts in sleep, energy, emotional sensitivity, without clear external cause. If you have 3 or more of these signals, the threshold is opening for you, and you have a choice now. Walk through consciously, following Thoth's map, or ignore it and let it gradually close. If you choose to walk through, understand this clearly. It won't be easy, it won't be quick, it won't be comfortable, but it's worth every moment of discomfort. Because on the other side is the life you've always known was possible, the life without masks, without lies, without performance, the life of the higher car, the second life, the real life. And here's the final truth Thoth taught. You don't have to walk through the threshold. You can live perfectly well in the first life until the end. Many people do this, build careers, families, external legacies, and die without ever having truly lived. Thoth didn't judge these people. He simply observed. They chose safety over truth. But if you've made it this far, if something inside you is resonating with these words, you're not one of those people. You're someone who feels the call. And when you feel the call, ignoring it is a slow death. It's calcifying while alive. It's becoming a ghost in your own life. So I ask you now directly, are you ready to walk through? Are you ready to die to who you think you are and be reborn into who you actually are? Are you ready to release what's false and embrace what's true? Because if the answer is yes, your journey begins now. Not tomorrow, not next Monday, not when you have more time. Now. Thoth taught that public declaration activates intention. When you commit before witnesses, something shifts. Your nervous system registers it differently. Your commitment deepens. So if this resonates, go to the comments and write, "I walk through the threshold," not as a casual comment, as a declaration to yourself and to reality. You're saying, "I'm ready for the second life." And when you declare this, something changes. You activate commitment. You invite accountability. You begin the alchemical process. After you write that, I want you to do one more thing. Tomorrow morning, begin phase 1. Create silence. Remove one habitual escape. Sit with yourself for 30 minutes and allow the dissolution to begin. The first days will be chaotic, but don't give up, because beyond the chaos is clarity. Beyond the death is rebirth. Beyond the threshold is the life you've always known was possible. Thoth taught that human life is a journey of two halves. The first half is preparation. The second half is realization. But most people never reach the second half because they're afraid to walk through the threshold. They're afraid to die to who they are and be reborn into who they can be. And so they spend the last 40 years of life merely repeating the first 40. Same work, same patterns, same masks, until the body finally stops, and they realize, too late, they never truly lived. But you don't have to be one of those people. You can choose differently. You can walk through. And when you do, you'll look back and think, how did I live 40 years without knowing who I really am? And you'll look forward and think, how much time do I have to live this truth completely? And the answer is, the rest of your life, which might be 10 years, might be 40 years, might be more. But each of those years will be worth more than all the previous years combined, because they'll be lived consciously, authentically, truly. The choice is yours. The threshold is open. Thoth left the map. David and Sarah walked through and found what's real. Now it's your turn. Write in the comments, "I walk through the threshold," and let the transformation begin. Welcome to the second life. This is who you actually are.